So don't be afraid to call yourself an artist. Just you get to choose what kind of artist you get to be. Go do what motivates you. Follow that voice. My voice has changed my direction of where I'm going. Reinvent yourself. Being true, I think, is a good part of it. And I think if you're true, you might find that happiness.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold. Brush. My name is Laura Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. On today's episode, we sat down with Sandra Duran Wilson, an abstract painter, sculptor, author, and scientist based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Sandra discusses how her dual upbringing among scientists and artists, plus early plein air experiences with her great aunt, shaped her experimental, curiosity-driven approach to art. She explains that creating is like breathing, and that her artistic voice emerged over thousands of paintings, influenced by her background in cognitive science and early fascination with cellular structures seen through a microscope. She also discusses how intention, story, and lived experience transform craft into art, emphasizing that story can be conveyed through color, texture, layers, and emotion, rather than literal representation. Sandra describes her book, Awakening Your Creative Soul, and related Soul Spark exercises as a manual for weekly play and experimentation, rooted partly in her years working with people in addiction and trauma recovery. Sandra also gives us tips about quieting the inner critic, using strategies like muting it, keeping a playful side canvas, working quickly with timers, and embracing imperfection and surrender, especially for perfectionist-oriented artists. Sandra also shares how she built a career as a full-time artist through outdoor shows, teaching, writing, and relationships with collectors. Finally, Sandra highlights her upcoming Ireland workshop and a long-term installation project wrapping burnt trees in painted canvases to respond to climate change-driven wildfires. Welcome, Sandra, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Laura. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to the show.
Yeah, thank you for being here. You're actually, I'm so happy to say, our first abstract artist. I have been researching your work because I think your work is very beautiful. It's expressive. It's atmospheric, as is expected of abstract. But I really love the personal touches that you have through your work. It has an ethereal quality to it in the composition. And I think that's also why I wanted to bring you on, is precisely because I find that abstract art is extremely composition heavy, a lot more than people might expect or realize. So I am so excited to pick your brain. Also, besides that, you're a scientist, which is also really cool. Oh man. But before we dive more into your work, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, as you said, my name is Sandra Duran Wilson, and I am a painter primarily, but I also do sculptural work and installation work, but primarily painting. I also am an author of 6 art technique books on acrylic painting. I've written for Acrylic Artist magazine and way back in the day, several other magazines that are no longer around. I had monthly columns. And I'm a teacher, although I'm finishing up that career pretty soon, just to focus more on my own work. And I've been teaching people for 25 years, both in person and online. I have a YouTube channel which has over 100 videos on it that it's really geared toward just ideas for people that are just starting, or even someone who's looking for something weird and quirky, because my background lends, I love to experiment. And so in a video, you might find me just going off track and, oh, well, let's just try this and see what happens. So that's what I do. And I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it's a very beautiful place high up in the mountains. A lot of people think we're in the desert, but we're not. We have snow outside the window right now and can go skiing. And it's a very beautiful place, very inspirational place to live. And artists have been coming here because of the light. We are at 7,000 feet altitude, so we have these incredibly blue skies and beautiful light to influence us. So that's me.
Awesome. Yeah, and I love that you said that you love to experiment because, of course, being scientist, artist, I think that's one of the things about painting that I think a lot of people don't explore as much, which is experimentation. One, because it can be scary since it's unexpected results, but I think that's one of the things that a lot of artists should be doing a little bit more is experimenting, at least on their free time. But I want to dive into your background a little bit more. So, do you mind telling us a bit about when you began to follow the path of the artist?
Well, I think I have to say that I always did, just because of the family I grew up in. And on half the family, they were scientists, doctors, the other half, they were artists. So for me, it was a combination of the two. Now, a lot of times people will say, oh, you're good at art, but you're not good at math or science. And so that kind of gets stuck in people's brains that, oh, I can't do that. I can't be good at math. I can't be good at science, but I like to draw. Well, drawing is science in a sense. So um, I had my first oil painting set at the age of 6, and I would go plein air painting with my great aunt, Sandra Duran, and we painted. I grew up on the border of Mexico, and so we would go out and just paint, and then she would help my brothers and I. We would do little landscapes and still lifes, and it was just a lot of fun. And but as an artist, as a career, it was probably as a teenager when I started. And I've had a lot of different ways of art making as a living. But when I was a teenager, I think the first thing I did, there was something I wanted, some like a bag or some kind of clothes. And my mom was like, no, I'm not buying that for you. So I said, well, I'm going to make it. And so it was a leather. And so I got the leather and I did the stitching and the beadwork on it. And before you know it, my friends wanted something. And then, a little shop wanted something. So I was making and selling accessories. And then that led to later on to stone cutting, sculpture, then silversmithing and jewelry, on and on and on. So, yeah, I've had other jobs during that time too, but I've always done art.
Wow. I love that there's so much emphasis in handcraft.
Mhm.
Because, I like to think that at its core, being an artist, like in general, I think you're a crafts person, and then it becomes art when I guess it transcends just an object that is useful, right? It's like, oh, this
Right.
isn't just like a belt. This is a beautiful belt, right? It's a belt that is made with a specific stitch that gives a specific quality. It isn't just, oh, I bought this painting print at, I don't know, Michael's, which nothing wrong with that, but it's a little bit different when it's made by a human through their hands
Mhm.
and their expression and their lived experience. I think that's what really elevates handcrafts. Nothing wrong with handcraft. I think handcraft is amazing and beautiful. And I am also a very crafty person, so I can relate.
I think the intention of art is it art. It comes from your purpose. I mean, you're the person creating. I was just at a museum show yesterday, and it had to do with South African telephone wire weaving. So it started out as an essential way of during apartheid. Many of the people were put into places where they had to work and they were not allowed their own belongings. So they would take and they would personalize like a mug or something that they used every day. And telephone wire was something that they could go scavenge and find. So you take that, you're basically repurposing, recycling art or materials, excuse me, then you elevate it to something beyond just craft. It becomes something of who that person is. It gives their voice a place out in the world that will last past them. And if you look at art in that sense, I mean, there's so many different forms of art. You know, we were talking earlier about ancient art, things that we see left in the world. Many of those things were just maybe murals on a wall that were decorative or instructional. So I think, you know, to come back full circle to what is art, I mean, craft, you definitely have to have the craft of something. You know, an elephant can take its tail and make a painting, so to speak. And I've seen this at art shows, but is that art or is it just happenstance? I mean, for the person who's going to pay a lot of money for it, I guess it's art. But what is your relationship with it? And I think what is art becomes a very personal question and answer.
Yes, yes, very well stated. I totally agree. And actually, this very seamlessly brings me to a very good question that I think it's a question that has many different answers for many different people. And that is, why do you create?
For me personally, I create because it's like breathing. I have to. You know, it's just something I've always done. Whether, you know, as a child, as a teenager, moving on, and even when I was doing other, you know, making jewelry, I always thought of my jewelry as miniature sculptures. And I always wanted to take them and make them really large. But metal is expensive. And, you know, I was 20 something years old at the time and I couldn't afford to do that. But it was always a way for me to express my view of the world. And I think really deep inside, the reason I create is to make sense of my view of the world. Because sometimes it's like you know, it's not a normal view. Most artists don't see the world as other people do. And I've seen some like little cartoons or memes where somebody might see red, blue, and green, and an artist is going to see 30 different shades of that. And we see the world in a different way. And as a scientist, I see the layers. I mean, my first abstract painting was done when I was 6 years old, looking through my dad's microscope at cellular level. So I'm painting the cells. I'm painting, I think it was a leaf or something. And so I'm seeing the, you know, the structure. So when I look at like a forest, I see the trees, but I also see in my mind what makes up the leaves, what makes up the bark, what makes up the earth. And I see all of these webs of interconnectedness. And that is, I think, why I create, is to make sense of that world. So to kind of draw other people into it.
And I think you mentioned there something very important, which is, your vision, right? The way you see the world. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's something, it's very interesting when you think about it, because that requires, the vision, right? It requires self-awareness to know
Mm-hmm.
what your vision is, of course. And what's funny is I find that it's a little bit like that transition between early childhood to maybe like later childhood, teenagehood, where it feels somewhat like you're emerging. It's like a slow emergence into consciousness rather than, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
awake now.
Mm-hmm.
At least for, I don't know, maybe someone out there does feel that I suddenly woke up type of feeling. But I feel like that's how artistic vision kind of is. And then developing it or even noticing it, I think that's one of the harder aspects at first, because interestingly, I think that leads to artistic voice eventually. So I wanted to ask you actually, how have you developed or noticed your own vision, and turned that artistic vision into what became your voice as an artist?
Well, I often get asked by my students if they're just starting out, how do I develop an artistic voice? And my simple answer to them is you paint a lot, or you draw a lot, or you sculpt, whatever your medium is, you do it a lot. And I remember hearing the saying, after you've made 1,000 paintings, then you start to figure out what you're doing. And when I was first starting out and I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But now that I'm past 1,000 paintings, I'm absolutely understand what that means, because even as even as much as I try and maybe do something a little different, my voice is like my voice. It's not going to change. And it has gotten that way from just painting a lot. I don't care if I'm printmaking or doing acrylic or doing encaustic or sculpture. This vision in my mind is still coming through. And you said something earlier that is very it's developmental, and the way the brain develops. As my final degree in science was in cognitive science, how we learn and develop. And so that age from basically around 2 years old, the children draw the big-headed people, and that is true all over the world, no matter the culture. Then as the brain develops, they begin to change that self-awareness, as you said, Laura, and they begin to be aware of things outside of themselves and other people. There was a very wonderful study. I cannot recall the woman's name. It was back in the 60s in San Francisco. She followed children for a very, very long time, from early childhood all the way up, I think, until about 12, in drawing, in art. She collected their art. And around the age of 9, most kids stopped drawing. And what happens at the age of 9 is you start to develop abstract reasoning. And they wanted something to be so realistic. If they couldn't draw the fire truck or the doll or whatever they were, spaceship, whatever they were trying to draw, if they couldn't draw it so realistically, they just gave up. And I think for a lot of artists, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I want to draw this or develop this. And for me, it's an abstract artist. I mean, yes, I had years of training as a draftsperson. I know how to draw. I mean, look at Picasso. He was one of the best drawers there is. But then I wanted to go beyond that. I wanted to see and that's where my voice started to come in. So, what is my voice trying to say without the apple sitting on the table? What is the feeling of the apple? And that's where abstraction comes in. And I think a lot of artists get to that point to where, okay, I want something more. I want to see beyond this, whether it's changing their style or changing their approach to art making.
Yes, yes. And I love that you oh, mentioned that, that it takes time, right? That
Mm.
figuring it out, what it all means to you, how it comes through, those are all so dependent on that, act of just continuing to perform it. And I imagine all the 9-year-old kids who didn't draw that fire truck perfect and they didn't
Yeah.
give up. And we're like, gosh darn it, I'm gonna do it. No matter what. And I think that's, some of the artists like us who just stuck around and kept going, because we just needed to continue. Like you said, it's like breathing. It's, like this is what comes naturally. And I think also that reminds me a bit of your book, which you mentioned to me last time, called Awakening Your Creative Soul.
Mm.
Um, because there's, it's so funny because it's very much a scientific method. Now that I think about it, and speaking to you about it, it's like, of course, you have your hypothesis, you experiment, you get your conclusion, and then you repeat and maybe change some stuff around in your variables, right?
Right.
Um, and eventually, of course, that leads to that artistic voice, but also primarily that creative act. You mentioned that it helps wake up the artistic spirit. Do you mind telling us a bit about your book, how it developed, and then a little bit of what you would recommend uh, for artists out there?
Well, the book it was the sixth book, my last one. The first five were very specific techniques. One was acrylic painting for encaustic effects. The other one was all about transfers. So on this book, on Awakening Your Creative Soul, it was really it was a way to get people to create every week. Was for people who are not in their studios. These were for people who have to, do their other life skills, jobs, whatever. And then they have to carve out a little bit of time to feed that creativity. And so I also developed a little thing that went along with it. It was called Mixed Media Soul Sparks, which was how the YouTube channel started. And it was just, here's 15 minutes. So follow along with this for 15 minutes and maybe it'll give you a little spark of inspiration. So every week there are 52 chapters in the book, which goes along with each week of the year. But just to jump back a little bit, where some of the ideas came from, I spent 10 years working in a residential treatment facility for addiction and trauma. Now, I wasn't a therapist in that sense, but and I wasn't an art therapist, but I was more of a guide for helping people find their spirit. Um, and we had 13 acres of land. I take people out on the land. We do different things. Sometimes we do crafts. Sometimes we do experiential stuff. It was just a way for them to tap into that part of their spirit that had been pressed down for so long. And so that's how some of the ideas made it into the book, were things that I had developed over that decade. And people, that really helped them in some ways. And so I thought, okay, well, let's take that idea and work with it. And some themes were like related to seasons, others were just like meditation or self-discovery and creating from that sense of place, because I really believe that the creative process it's not just what you create with your hands or your feet or your mouth or whatever. It is, whether you're an actor, a painter, a singer, a musician, it's your whole emotional, your mental, your spiritual, all of that goes into the creation of whatever you want to create. And if you're locked off from a part of that, if you're, creating something very rigid and you're not tapping into that soul spark, then your art is not going to have a depth that it could have. And so I believe when you really dig deep, you find that depth and that really gives you a stronger voice. So the book it's not a technical guide for painting by any means. I would say it's a manual for play. So
I think that's perfect. Because again, play and experiment are very similar.
yes, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, I
I
mean, obviously
remember
depends,
an
but
artist getting she was like, "Oh, don't use that word play. Art is serious business." I'm like, okay, I can see that. That means a lot to you that it's serious business. But I don't know. I just don't want to go through my life all serious all the time. I'm like too much of a playful person. So I'd rather my worldview be more playful.
yeah, and I think there's something else that comes attached to play that experimentation also has, which is curiosity.
Yes,
Um, and I think that's what makes, gosh, I feel like a lot of the inventions that have happened, you know, through history have just been through sheer curiosity. Just someone
absolutely.
who's like, how does that work? How can I make that work? It's like every time I look at like ancient Roman technology, I'm always
Mhm.
fascinated about the people who put their heads together to make it happen.
Mhm.
And that's no different from, you know, someone wanting to develop their paintings, right? It's like, I wonder what happens if I switch out this red for a green, just opposite, right? How can I use that and make a similar image? And then suddenly you learn something new through that. But it is, I think, nurturing that curiosity that I think also really helps the artwork, right?
Absolutely. That's like one of my taglines. It's like I'm a curiosity instigator. And it's like to me, that's the whole, I guess if I had to sum it up in one word, why do I create? And it's like to entertain my curiosity is it really is because it's like, well, what would happen if I tried this? And like I said, I'll do that a lot of time on camera when I'm filming for a YouTube video. It's like I go totally off track. Oh, well, let's try this, and see what happens. And if it turns to mush, well, now we know. How do I? A lot of times when I'm teaching in person, I'll really try and mess something up as much as I can because I don't want people to think that, oh, every painting is like, oh, it just runs along this perfect course. Oh gosh, any artist knows that never happens. And I call it the really ugly middle. Sometimes those teenage years can just get really nasty. And you have to work through that phase. And if you get to that place and you put something away and you don't look at it again, you're never going to learn how to really push beyond that. And I don't care what type of artwork you do, you're always going to have a painting that's going to push you. And you're going to have to say, well, what do I do now? And if you're not willing to get down and dirty and messy with it, then you're losing an opportunity to really push beyond your comfort zone. And so I would rather just jump right into it right away. It's like, oh, let me just see how I can really mess this up. And the people are like in the class, they might, maybe I have a painting going, they're like, oh, that's so beautiful. I'm like, okay, let's just mess it up. And they're like, oh no. And it's like, okay, so now it's not precious anymore. Now I can really go for it because I'm not so attached to the preciousness. And I'm not afraid to try something new. And that's a big piece. Big, big lesson. Yeah.
Oof, it is a huge lesson because you've mentioned a few things there that, ooh, especially that last one, you know, kill your darlings.
Yes,
It's
exactly.
it can be hard. And I think it's because oftentimes when we create something, and I'm sure it happens in abstract as much as it does in realism.
Mhm.
Um, when you make something and you have no idea how to replicate it or how it happened,
Right.
you become obsessively protective of it. Um, but oftentimes that holds you back even further from something even better, right? Because
Yes,
you've now limited your
absolutely.
vision to this false sense of perfection, right? Which
Hmm.
perfection tends to hold us back from making something even cooler. Because perfection is such a strange concept that is still limited by your own lived experiences, so you can never really attain it. Um, but also the other thing you mentioned there, which I think many of our listeners, including myself, struggle with, is when you're doing these experiments, right? When you're allowing yourself to mess things up, as you're saying, how can you turn off the hypercritical voice that's always vigilant, that always wants you to, no, 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 what are you doing? You're messing it up. But like, how do you turn off that judgmental side? It's probably not perfectly possible, but how do you recommend it?
Well, I learned a long time ago to trust the process because being an abstract painter, in a way, it's different than being a realistic painter. Um, I may start out with something realistic and then I turn it into something abstract, or the other way around. Um, there's a painting behind me. If you can't see it, if you're just listening, but it is a painting I did based on a hike to the Grand Canyon. It's the one back there. And it was more the experience of the feeling. There's some little details in there about the petroglyphs that I saw, the night sky, some other elements. So I'm taking the trip, I'm taking the emotions, I'm taking everything from that journey, and I'm learning how to put it into a painting without it being realistic. So in my mind, I'm still seeing all the realistic elements, but I'm translating it to something different. I think when I'm translating, it's easier for me to turn that critic off because I'm like, okay, critic, you're speaking Greek, I'm speaking Swahili over here, so don't even mess with me, okay? And and it's like this is how I have to operate for a while. Now later on, when I'm coming back to the painting and trying to finish it, the critic may come up. But here's a real important piece about the critic. The critic has a function. Um, I there's the critic that is totally out of control, that goes back to your childhood, or that teacher that told you could not paint. Why did you paint that tree blue? That's the out of control critic. Okay, that one you can learn to turn off. And one of the tricks I use with my students is I said, okay, think of it as a remote control. Boom, you hit the mute button. So she's working at a table and she drew this circle on the table. And I'm going around the room and I come back over there and she's pounding on the table on the button. She goes, that critic is really being strong right now. It's like, so she's muting the critic. So sometimes just a tangible tool like that, a visual, to mute that critic. But the other critic is that you need to listen to. It's like, well, that shape is really not working, and that color next to that color, maybe you should do something about that. So that's, you have to have that critical part of analyzing your painting. But the out of control critic, yeah, not so much. So mute it.
Oh, I wish it were that easy to mute it. I'll have to
Well,
try it though.
practice, practice.
Yes,
And
exactly.
sometimes just get an old remote, and the actual physical act of holding it and pressing that button becomes a trigger in your mind. So it's a matter of training your mind. It's doable.
Yeah.
It just takes a
Yeah.
little practice. And turn your paintings upside down. Absolutely. Always turn them upside down. So then
Yes.
you fix things sometimes just by turning them upside down. In abstraction.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually one of the big things I recommend sometimes for, if you're, I mean, one of the things obviously is just step away for a little
Mm-hmm.
while. That's one of the
Right.
big ones because your eye gets tired, your brain gets tired,
Mm-hmm.
and it's good to see things with a fresh
Fresh.
eye, especially the next morning. And that can either be a really good thing or a really bad thing. It could be like, oh, I think I did great today. And you go to your studio and
Mm-hmm.
suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Or you can have the opposite reaction, which is like, oh, this is terrible. And then the next day you're like, huh, that's not so bad.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. It's, it happens either way. But yeah, I think that critical voice, that, big, loud, mean voice, I think that's the really hard one to shut off when you're experimenting. Um, do you think maybe playing or trying to switch into like just focusing on play, do you think that would also
Mm-hmm.
help a lot more with shutting
Sure.
off that big guy?
Sure. I think it really, that's a really good point, is that, if you shift the mindset to where I am not creating my masterpiece here, I am just experimenting. So my trick with that, and I do this still all the time, in my studio, I always have a second panel or canvas around that. maybe I'll have some leftover paint and I just really don't like to waste things. So I'll just go paint something on, or I have some medium, I'll go make a texture over there. And I'm not attached to that piece. It's not like I'm just like throwing paint on it, piling it up. I'm actually putting it on with intention, but not like I am on my masterpiece over here. So this is my play piece. And you can do that if you're a realistic painter or if you're an abstract painter. And you're going to find that a lot of times your play piece is going to be much better than your masterpiece. And that is a great way to train yourself to let go. And because you can tell that critic, hey, look, I'm just this over, I'm playing over here. Don't be sticking your nose. Don't even look over here. If you want to go do that, go to the other one. Leave me alone. I'm over here. And pretty soon you're going to find that, oh, I love this technique. I'm going to do it more often. And then you find it's easier to make that switch.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty
Yeah.
genius.
But it's your mindset. You got to
Yep.
trick that critic. So there are ways to trick it. And then after you keep doing this over time, it gets less and less. It's just like any kind of trauma. Over time it starts to recede. So, but I think like speaking of looking at it as trauma, it's like, okay, by confronting it, by saying, okay, I see you, I hear you, but this is what I'm going to do about it. So this is what I choose to do about it. So it is an internal conversation that you have. And so
Yes.
painting is a great way to work through issues.
It is. I mean, I think for many of us, we come to realize eventually, when you're, and like you said, it doesn't really depend on the intent, right? And on that self-awareness aspect of, reflection, which I think many artists have.
Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of people that I've spoken to usually find that their work really does reflect their inner thoughts, whether
Sure.
it's inner turmoil, happiness, etc. And sometimes it might even show the opposite, which is funny. I recently interviewed an artist who said that she had the opposite reaction. It's almost like, when she was upset, her work would reflect happiness instead. And then when
Hmm.
she was happy, she would enjoy looking at the darker aspects. So it's like, oh,
Hmm.
you know, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But I really love that trick that you mentioned for that critical voice because I think, like I said, many artists struggle with that. And having that outlet of like, oh, I'm just going to play over here. And then once that
Hmm.
play, works out, and I totally agree. I have noticed that sometimes my little doodles or fun stuff that I do on the side always have, it's almost like this like they have like more air to breathe, if that makes sense. It's
Hmm.
liberated, it's more free than like the very exact like thing. Sometimes a color study, right? A lot of people who do plein air, for example, they'll say like their initial feeling of an area, and when they painted
Hmm.
those brushstrokes, oftentimes they're much more alive than the
Yes.
final studio piece, which is
Hmm.
very interesting. um
Well, it's
Also the
because
oh,
they're putting themselves into that emotion at that time. And another great way to get that same alive feeling is to limit your time. I started out doing a thing, it was like 7-minute paintings. And of course, obviously they're very small. You could have your palette all mixed up. And I found that I reduced it to anywhere under 5, sometimes even 3 minutes. If I was doing a really quick, like you said, color or landscape study or something, because I found that what happened between 5 and 7 minutes is I started to get in there with those little details and it lost that freshness. So I recommend that, to just start your studio day, or even if you've just got 10 minutes, mix up a quick little palette and just, keep a little notebook around. And it's really liberating to do that. Set a timer. Okay, 4 or 5 minutes, and boom, you're done.
at BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world. because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by FASO. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal, considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast.
Yeah. And I think also that's an, I would say that's a really also great way of honing technique even more because
Mm,
you're so forced to really funnel all your skill into that exact, like, okay, I gotta hit that angle, I gotta hit that color note, I've gotta hit that. So, I mean, I think that's also why a lot of plein air artists they swear by plein air as one of the best ways to increase your skill
mhm,
in a relatively quick way. And I agree, it's because you are so forced to move quick, move precisely, as
mhm.
precisely as possible, because you're going to run out of time. That sun is moving so
Right.
fast across this wall. We're rotating. We're
Yeah.
rotating so fast that of course it's gonna, all the lights are gonna change, all the shadows,
Yeah.
the temperatures, the colors, everything's gonna shift, so you have to catch it. So yeah, doing timed exercises, I totally agree. I'm actually, I wrote it down for myself because that's, I think there is such thing as giving yourself too much time, like you're saying, you know, when you start
Hmm.
fiddling around a little too much, or what I like to call pushing paint, which means
Hmm.
you're not improving what you got there. That's
Yeah.
when you know it's over, and you got to stop. And actually, I did it. So this kind of brings me into a very interesting aspect that I think a lot of artists also face, which is that constant sort of battle that happens between internally motivated work and externally motivated work. How have you experienced that? And then what would you say is the primary way that you prefer to focus on your work?
What exactly do you mean by externally motivated?
So I would say externally motivated. Examples would be like, oh, the way that that guy painted that is so cool. I want to paint something exactly like that.
Ah,
Or my
okay.
gallerist is telling me I should paint this more. And I guess it's okay because I kind of enjoy it. Or even just, you know, being too exposed to, like I said, like social media or like a lot of outside influences that kind of muddle that sort of inner voice that's like trying to come out. How do you balance that?
Well, I think that once you're aware of your inner voice, once you know your inner voice, that at least from okay, just going to speak from my experience. I know what my visions for many things are, for many projects, my inner voice. I know I trust it, but I love to look at other techniques, other ideas, and many times it's like something I see in a museum show or a gallery show. It's like, oh, I really like that idea, but that idea sparks something else for me. So I can take that grain and plant it in my field, and it's going to come up. and it's going to show my voice. Now, if you're just starting out and you're looking at a lot of different things on social media, hopefully you're going to gallery shows and to museum shows to see and experience many different kinds of art. That's how we learn. I mean, that's how it used to be. You would go paint from the masters. And you have to be influenced by that to hone your skill. But then and again, it comes back to just paint more, paint more, paint more. You might find that, I really like how this particular technique. I mean, personally for me, I love texture, whether it's applied texture or implied texture. And I'm a technique driven person. So I'm going to say, oh, well, I like how that. What if I did this? What if I use this material and incorporated into that and just played around with that? But when somebody tells me, oh, you better paint this way, I'm like, really? Now, I do commissions for people, but the way I would tell them, it's like, okay, we're deciding on the size, we're deciding on the color palette, and then you leave the rest to me. And I'll send you pictures, and I don't take payment until I'm done because I'm not going to paint something that I can't sell myself. So whether it's for a gallery or whether it's for a person, this is what I paint, but yes, I'm flexible. I can paint you something, in this color palette, or so there's a way to work around it, but still stay true to your own voice. And I really think that you need to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of art. I remember when I first started in art school and I was looking at performance art. I was like, what the hell is this? It was like, I just really didn't get it. And I found that the stronger reaction I had to something, the more I understood it, that I got drawn into it over time. And because I began to look underneath, what is this person? They're sitting in an empty room wrapped in a hide, and it was like, or they're, so just something really bizarre. And I said, okay, well, why are they doing this? I got curious. So once I started unearthing the why of what they're doing, I began to understand it. And that I think helped me develop my voice because it's like, well, why am I painting this? Why am I seeing the world this way? So when you see something that you're kind of like, oh, I don't like that. Well, why don't you like it? Understand why you don't like it. This was a a challenge I used to do. Sometimes I would like be going back in the days when we had magazines. You could do it on social media now, but I'd be flipping through a magazine and maybe I was looking at doing a remodel project in my house. And so I'm looking at like a house magazine and I'm looking through it and it's like they've got colors or they've got decorations that I can't stand. But I'd have to challenge myself to find one thing on the page that I liked. And so that's a good exercise to go, why don't I like this? And what is there in that I can take and use myself? So,
Yes. Yes. And so I actually do the same thing, which is so
yeah.
funny. And I'm sure maybe some other people have done it in a different way. It's kind of like, your sibling or a friend shows you maybe an outfit that they really like, and it's not
Mhm.
really your style. You
Right,
don't
right.
vibe with it, but it's their style. So you try to find something in it that you like. So you say something positive. Unless
Mhm.
it's just absolutely horrendous and you're just like, what are you even thinking? Um, but I think that's, yeah, I totally agree. That's a very important quality too. And once again, it makes perfect sense, being someone who, who's a scientist, right? You have to almost, or not always, but I think you become so naturally used to asking yourself the why of everything
Mhm.
all the time. And I think that's one of the best ways to go through life, actually, because you don't just say, oh, I really hate this, right? It's
Yeah.
like, but why? I think that's
Yeah.
such an important quality because I used to have that reaction about specific artwork as well. Um, and then, once you start asking yourself, but why do I not like it? What is it that it represents to me? Or maybe it reminds me of a negative experience I may have
Hmm.
had. And then suddenly you're in the realm of like, critical thinking and reflection and then self-awareness. And then you can look at the piece again and then almost make peace with it.
Hmm.
Because you're like, I understand now. This is
Yeah.
the thing. And you can pull something, like you said, something positive from it, that you then can pull into your own work
Yes.
or into story, which I think that's
Hmm.
something else that I wanted to cover with you a little bit about
Hmm.
story because um, that's I think it becomes very much attached to just like writing a book, a really good book
Hmm.
with a really good plot. I think painting also has that composition of story that it's really based on story. How have you developed story in your work?
Well, I think story is any visual artist or any artist, any creator, their story. I mean, we are all storytellers, whether we're artists or not. I mean, just our relationships, the way we go through life. We live on stories. Stories are about interactions with other people. And if you're not having interactions with other people, that in itself is a story. So to just to get back to what we were saying right before, it's like if you have a reaction to something, and then go, why don't I like this or what? So here's a tip. The stronger, the bigger your reaction is, there's something there. And that gets to story. So like if the story is um what am I trying to say? It's like I'll read quantum physics or science fiction. And it's like the possibilities for me is like these amazing possibilities. I almost went into physics, and my friends who were physicists, they're like, you really would not do well with this. It's too structured for you. And I'm like, you're probably right. So I started to look at physics in a different way. I would read about theoretical physics, and it's like, oh, this is possible. And so I would start to create worlds of what does it look like? What does a gluon or a muon or a black hole look like in to me? And what is the story of like, why would I even, I didn't have to have a whole sci-fi opera, but it was just like, what does this look like? And why would it look like that? And so that would be a story. It was funny. I spent a lot of years doing outdoor art shows here in Santa Fe, and right next to us is Los Alamos, which is a large research scientific facility with a lot of physicists. And they would have big conferences, and I'd get these physicists drawn into my booth. And I remember having a conversation with one day and saying, "Yeah, this is a gluon and this is a muon, and which are tiny little particles." And he's looking at it and he goes, yeah, I think that's what it would look like. Says, all right, I got it. But story can be told through color, story can be told through composition, emotion, uh, lack of movement, stillness, chaos, feelings. These are all stories. And I think that by being exposed to more types of art that you wouldn't normally look at, you're going to understand story better. Um, like I said, I went to this exhibition yesterday, and it's actually about story and time. And it was a wide range of everything from film to traditional Hispanic arts to just everything. But it was a really good lesson in how do people tell story. Story of place, story of displacement, story of pain, of loss, so we're all telling a story no matter what we paint. And I think in abstract work, it's harder because people are not seeing like, okay, here's the building, here's the barn, here's like, you can, it's in a way, it's easier to convey a sense of home or loss or joy or sadness when you have things, instant tells. When you're just using color and shapes to tell a story, you have to really evoke a mood to tell the story. And that can be more challenging as an abstract artist. So there's one painting behind me on this side, and that's actually an image I made of using oil and water that I photographed shooting down through the oil and water to a gold leaf panel that I had created before. So I made that imagery and then put it into, it's embedded in plexiglass, which is then embedded into a long wooden panel that I created a lot of texture and multiple layers. So for me, layers are telling a story. There's layers, little tiny things that you really have to get up close and see, almost with a microscope. But that is my story. And somebody asked me, they said, well, why do you paint on these long, skinny panels? And I really didn't know until I stopped and thought about it. And it was like, oh, these are like the slides that I looked at through my dad's microscope.
I was gonna say that
So
it looks like a slide.
it does, it does.
Yeah.
And I find that stories sometimes I'm painting and I'm just like in the moment, I'm creating. And I don't know the story until I look back. And sometimes it might be a year, sometimes it might be more. And then I'm going like, that's what that is about. So it can be part of us knows what we're doing, and the other part has to get in on it later on. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's that Jungian shadow uh side
yeah, yeah,
that
exactly.
I
Yes,
yep. And you gotta, it's gonna come out whether you want to or not. It will make itself known.
it will, absolutely.
Yes.
And it's our job as artists to then pay attention and to see it. So that's the other piece.
Mhm. Oh, it's so fascinating. I love it. I love it. Um, Again, because I think, it's that aspect of, I think the one thing I really appreciate and love about abstract is the level of surrender that has to happen.
Mm,
That oftentimes I think realist painters might struggle with, because of course when you're limited to recreating reality in a specific way, or even just working from imagination has its limitations.
mhm,
um, you have to practice surrender, and but then return to control, and then back to surrender and return to control in this
mhm.
cyclical sort of way that I think is so much easier to see in abstract than it is to see in realism. So I think we were talking about this earlier. Realism has a way of attracting, and I'm also speaking from experience here, perfectionists who are a little bit neurotic, want things to be exactly how they're supposed to be. But then when you have that surrender of abstract, it can be a little bit scary for people who are perfectionists.
You say, you have to surrender and you want something and realistically to look like what you think it should look like. But here's a question, ask yourself, well, if I had, you know, if I looked at it through a different filter, through a different lens, or if I only had vision in one eye, or if I couldn't see, what would it look like? Start to put yourself into different positions of like, what is it really supposed to look like? There's going to be, it's a way to trick yourself into letting go of some of that perfectionism because, there's really no perfectionism. And as we were talking earlier, the difference between, the photographs, they flatten out a 3D, into a two-dimensional. So there's tricks of the lenses. And if you're painting from a photograph, or even if you're in a museum and you're painting from something, another painting in front of you, there's limitations. And I think you need to honor those limitations. You need to say that, yeah, that's part of the process. So let me see if I can push it beyond those limitations. And you just start to let go a little bit. It's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Oh
it's not
man,
easy. It's not
it
easy.
isn't. Yeah, it isn't. I think it's really funny because even just reaching a high level of technique, right? That's, I think, when many artists start realizing the importance of that surrender, or they get so tired of that hyper focus on almost like coloring book style, like coloring the perfectly made drawing type of situation. I think that's when the magic starts to happen, because then it's like, okay, how do I unlearn all of these habits that I've built around this excessive focus on technique, and how can I translate those skills into something more full of surrender or freedom, like we're saying, which I
Try
think is
painting
really
with just a palette knife
oh, or a massive brush. Does that count?
or your hands, your fingers.
Oh, yeah, I already do that. But that's a good one too.
Yeah.
Just don't use dangerous pigments, you guys.
Right. No, I
No
always wear
cadmium.
gloves, even with acrylics.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah,
yeah, it's change tools
yeah. That's a good one.
or try a different medium.
Yes,
Play around in
yes.
watercolor if you're an oil painter, or in caustic if you're an acrylic painter, or just try something new.
Hmm. Exactly. I think that's one of those ways to really trick the system, and hopefully also
Hmm.
the critical voice.
Yeah, yeah.
Fingers crossed. But yeah, so I wanted to ask you now, because I'm also very curious to know, since you've had a very fascinating path through all of these different crafts, different jobs. Um, what was it like for you when you became a full-time artist?
Mm, well, like I said early on, I was an artist, but I also had a second job. So when I transitioned to only doing artwork and not doing another job, then it was really scary because I had been working, like I said, a decade at this facility, and I had just met my husband. We just gotten married and bought a house, and it was like, boom, then the company was sold and I lost my job. So I was like, oh, okay. So now, because I was already doing my artwork, I said, well, I guess I'll just have to do more art shows, do my work more. Well, within the first year, I made more money doing just my art than I had doing both. So, I mean, I had already, excuse me, had already been out there. So it wasn't like I was just starting. But it was a matter of trusting. It was a hell of a lot of work. I mean, sometimes I work 7 days a week. It's crazy to be a full-time artist. I told a friend of mine, I said, I fired my old boss because I was working all the time. My videographer, we would be like cranking out these videos, and I said to him, I was like, yeah, I fired that boss. Let's work a half day. And it took me many, many years to get to that point of like, okay, well, I don't have to be constantly working. And so it is, I mean, every artist path is going to be completely different. You know, can you go out and be a full-time artist? I don't know. It depends. What's your How much do you have to spend on, your rent and your food? Where do you live in the world? What are your expectations? Everybody's different. But to create, to satisfy that creativity within a person, whether you're, a lot of people I get are the ones that at 9 years old, they stop drawing and they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go get this job. I'm going to go. And then they're in their 50s, they're in their 60s, and they're like, I want to go back and draw that plane. I want to go back and find that creative spirit. And those are a lot of the people I work with. And it's important that you don't have to make your living as an artist to enjoy your creativity. You just need to create. So everybody's answer is going to be different. Do I need to pay the bills? If you're 25 years old and you're just starting out, you need to pay bills. You might have to work a couple of jobs. It's unless you're extremely lucky and that you get great gallery representation, and it happens. And but you just really have to be working all the time. You really have to be painting more, getting out doing shows. And just because you're in a gallery doesn't mean you're going to sell paintings. So for me, my route was to sell directly myself. And fortunate to live in a city that people come from all over the world to see art. So I was able to meet people and sell my work and keep them as collectors. And over time, just building that up. So everybody's route's going to be different. So I guess the first thing you need to say is, how do I take care of myself? And then why do I want to paint? So for some people, they're like, they never want to show their work. That's what they've told me. Then they sell something and suddenly it changes. And they're like, oh, ooh. And because it's like, oh, you get this immediate response to your work. And so then they want to do it more. And so I just had one of my students who'd been with me in Mexico not long ago. I was doing a retreat down there. And so now it's like, oh, I need a website. I'm selling my work. And so I was like, okay, here's your link. Get your website up and be legit and sell more work. So, and she's retired from a long career. But yeah, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I love that you mentioned that, that validation that happens for a lot of artists when they sell a piece, whether it's their first piece or even their 100th piece. I
Mhm.
think we're always low key kind of doubting ourselves, like, is this piece good? I don't know, it could just be realism. The
No,
hypercritical
no,
realism,
no,
right? Okay,
no.
good. It's not
I
just
would
me.
say to my husband, I said, oh my gosh, am I ever going to sell another painting? And he would just look at me like, yeah, I think you will.
I love your
But yeah,
husband.
we all go through that doubting that, oh no, it's like, what's
Yeah.
wrong? What's wrong with the work? What's wrong with me? And it's like, no, we all have that insecurity. But then you sell something and you're like, oh, yes.
It's like, oh, good. I'm not
Yeah,
a fake.
no, no,
I'm not
we're all
pretending.
like that. We're
Yeah,
all like
okay,
that.
that's good. I mean, it's not good, but it's good to know that we're in good company.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, because it is, yeah, it's I think deep down, I think the part about it that kind of is scary is the vulnerability. It's the feeling like, man, I worked so many hours on this, or I put my heart and soul into this piece, and it's important, and who could ever see it in that light, or who could ever care about it, right? That's, I think,
Mhm.
it's one of the only other things that really comes to mind is like that. Again, it could just be that hypercritical voice that says, but who cares, like, there are hundreds and thousands of really beautiful paintings out there that are probably better than yours, right? And I think that's the hard part that I think a lot of artists, when they're thinking of selling, I think that's one of the big things, also speaking from experience here, to overcome, which is that imposter syndrome,
Well, it gets back to story.
Mm.
So, what is the other part of the story is you're creating this work. That we talked about all the different ways of story, But the story continues when somebody buys that work or somebody lives with that work, even if you give it away to someone, that becomes part of the story. Or I have a lot of work that's in public art collections. And so a lot of people will see those. And that is to me, that's the other half of the story. My creating it is the first half. How people interact with it is the other half. And they get to make up their story. They get to say what they see, what they feel. And I step back. My job is done because I made my story. And if they want to see something different than that's their story. It becomes their story. And I think that is the beauty of, you know, imposter syndrome. I mean, come on. It's like we're all imposters in life and we're all realists. It's like, I understand that imposter thing. It's like, yeah, am I really an artist? And I know people who had a hard time saying that, but it's like, oh, just don't be so damn serious. Yes, you're an artist. You made that. It's like, get over it. Let's go on. It's like when
Oh man.
somebody thinks enough about a piece to take it and say, I really want this. And you're going, oh no, but it's not this, it's not, it's like just close your mouth and say thank you. That's the best advice. Don't say, oh, but this is that. No, no, no. Say thank you and oh, I'm so glad you're getting it. And that's the best thing you can do.
Yes. I actually think that that bit where you said, "Oh, shut up," to stop taking it seriously. I think I'm going to clip that and just play it for myself the next time I feel like I'm having like one of those moments where I'm stuck in my head about it. It's like Sandra said so. Sandra said so,
That's
and she
it.
believes in you.
That's right. I do. I do
Yes.
believe in you. And this imposter syndrome thing is like, mm-mm, nope, you're real. I see you. You're there. You're no imposter. So there you go.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
And everyone out there, you are an artist.
That's
If
right.
you're
That's
listening to
right.
this. Yes.
There's a little side to that. I remember a student I had a long, long time ago, and we were talking about that. We were talking about calling ourselves artists. And she was like, I don't want to call myself an artist. And I'm like, really? Why is that? And she had taken a painting class at a museum in the city where we were. And she said that the teacher was just so mean and nasty that she never wanted to be like that. I'm like, well, there's a lot more artists out there than that one person. So use that person as an example, and you can be a different kind of artist. And she was quite talented, And I said, so don't be afraid to call yourself an artist. Just you get to choose what kind of artist you get to be. So
Yeah.
be a good one, be a happy one. Don't have to be happy. Just go do what motivates you. Go do what is it? Follow that voice. My voice has changed my direction of where I'm going over the years, and I like to say I change my direction every decade. Reinvent yourself. So being happy doesn't have to be part of it, but being true, I think, is a good part of it. And I think if you're true, you might find that happiness or the joy. I mean,
Yeah. I agree. I agree. There comes and it's so funny because it reminds me a lot of the Stoics and also
mhm,
aspects of Buddhism, where you can recognize your sadness, but it's a part of being alive.
right.
So sometimes it's happened to me, and I'm sure it may have happened to you as well, where like when you recognize that through that sadness you're participating, or
Hmm.
through that suffering of some sort, you're participating in the human condition, right? The
Exactly.
experience of being human. It's almost a strange kind of happiness that happens through that. Of
Well, it's part
wow,
of that letting go, that
yeah.
surrender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, beautiful. Oh man. And then back to the more
Well,
mundane aspects. Unless you want to mention something more.
Stoicism is a very good philosophy for see or Buddhism. And you see something, you name it, you let go of the fear of it, and you just move on. It's like, yeah, I'm feeling sad today. Okay, well, still got to go do the dishes or go grocery
Mhm.
shopping, and just keep moving, and eventually that mood will change.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I also read somewhere, I know this is a bit of a side note, but it might help someone out there who's an artist who's very anxious or sad. But it
Mhm.
actually only takes 90 seconds to feel an emotion. Then the more you try to avoid it, the more it prolongs it, actually. So, like you said, you name it, you recognize it, you let yourself feel it, and then
And
you,
smile,
yes.
smile, because smiling will change your mood, or
Yes.
laugh.
Yeah, look up some funny videos.
Yeah.
That's what I like to do sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, back to the more mundane uh, aspects of the business side of being an artist. Actually, it's not that mundane. I think it can be very exciting. But do you mind telling us how it is that you developed that collector base for yourself? What were some of the marketing aspects that you did that really helped put your work out there?
Well, I think the biggest way was, like I said, I did outdoor art shows every weekend, 6 months out of the year. I'd be up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning in all kinds of weather. Hell of a way to make a living, but I did it for quite a few years. And I met a lot of different people. I also had my work in galleries. I would submit to some exhibitions, juried exhibitions to get my work in. And I just, in teaching, writing and teaching, opened up to a lot more people. So a lot of my students became collectors, or collectors became students, which I really loved. I had some really big collectors, and one of the women, she started to take a course with me, and now she's doing beautiful work of her own. So it's relationship is what how you build a collector base, whether that relationship is online, whether it's in person, whether it's with your gallerist. Usually, a gallery will not share collector information because that's their business. But if you have a good relationship with your gallerist, they open up opportunities for you to, have exhibitions, to meet and greet. One gallery I was in would let me come in and paint, and so I'd be in the gallery painting, and I would meet a lot of people, and they see what you're doing, and they're like, "Oh, I love that," and they buy stuff. So it's it's I guess the thing I said to myself early on when I had to say, "Okay, I'm a full-time artist now," is say yes to opportunities. And I said yes to a lot of opportunities that were like, oh, that was a dumb one, but you know, you just you just say yes. You have to kind of keep moving, and it's a bit different world right now. People are not, a lot of galleries, especially since COVID, have closed. A lot of the major galleries I was in don't exist anymore. People are getting older. The gallery owners are retiring. Um, and younger people are buying more online. So I still sell things online, more so to people that already buy my work. Um, but here's the thing: you're going to sell when you first start out. You're going to sell to your friends and your family. That's who's going to buy your work. And that's for everybody. We've all been there. Then you start to sell to people you don't know. And that's really the big whoop de woo. Yeah, you're going to go out and celebrate. And then you're going to start to get into more shows or galleries, or you're going to meet more people, and maybe they're gonna, or maybe they're gonna buy a small piece from you online. And then once they see the quality of it, then they're more apt to buy something larger. Um, I've experimented with doing some of the big art venues. My gallery's taken my work to, like, Art Miami and New York and San Diego, the big art fairs. And I don't know, they don't do a lot, but everybody's got an opinion of how to sell. And I don't know, it's like you keep trying different things. You find something that works for you. And if you're on social media, and I do a lot on social media, but it's not as strong at conveying my story every day on social media. And I just decided that I'm tired of feeding that lion every day, that my joy in creating is more important than really creating content every single day. So I've decided not to do that so much. And do I sell as much work? I don't know. But you've got to do what's going to keep you sane, what's going to keep you healthy, what's going to keep you happy. And if you really don't like doing something, you've got two choices. You either outsource it or you don't do it. So that's kind of my motto. It's like there are things that I have other, I've learned how to do all my own video editing, and I really had a good time with it, but I am not very fast at it. So I hire a videographer who's very good at it. And then I can spend more of my time developing the painting. The same with other, business things, that if you can't afford to pay somebody, trade. I've gotten my work in a lot of places, my eye doctor, my other doctor, um, people, your gym, or, waiting rooms. Get your work out there. Get it. The more you can have it seen, the better.
Yes, absolutely. I've also spoken to artists who have their work in restaurants as well, and that's helped
Mhm.
them also sell work.
It
Yeah, it's
is.
wherever human
The only
eyes
thing
are.
with restaurants is your work comes back smelling like the restaurant. So,
Unless someone buys it, then you know what? If the food was good, that's kind of a good memory.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Oh man. So, Sandra, do you have any upcoming shows, exhibitions, workshops, anything fun that you would like to promote?
Well, I do have my final in-person teaching event. It's going to be in Ireland this summer, and it's in an art school in County Mayo in Western Ireland. And I think I still have a couple of places left in the workshop. I don't think it's quite sold out yet. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I've taught there before, and it's just an absolutely beautiful place, part of the country. And so if you're interested in that, it's on the website. I have some, as I said earlier, I'm kind of changing directions, and I'm working on an installation project of in New Mexico. A few years ago, we had a very large forest fire that destroyed, it was the largest in the history of the state. And I've connected with some people who have lost their home and a good portion of their forest. And we're doing a project where we're creating painted canvases, and we're wrapping the burned tree in these colorful canvases. We're doing video and photography installations of it. And I started this project a few years ago in art residency in southern Italy, and then I continued it in a residency in France by wrapping these very large chestnut trees in this forest in eastern France. And I mean, that was such a lush, beautiful place. And when I got home, I was like, okay, we don't have those big kind of trees here. And then I started looking at the burn scars, and I was like, well, what can I do to bring awareness of the climate change and the effects of climate change into people's awareness without it being horrific or feeling like I'm beating them over the head with information. And so I got this idea of creating an art, and it's evolving. It's still developing. I'm going to get the people whose land we're working on. I'm going to get them to my studio to also paint some of the canvases and do some of these installations. And then we will take the project into a gallery setting or museum setting. So it's kind of a long-term project, but it's my passion project right now. So I'll be posting more about it on social media as it goes along. And so those are the things that I have.
Exciting. Yes. And then do you mind telling us what your website and social media are, and YouTube channel for that matter?
Well, my website is Sandra Duran Wilson, and my name, and this I think for my business Facebook, it's Sandra Duran Wilson Artist, and it's all under my name. Branding is, and that's another thing in marketing is keep your branding under your name. Some people will come up with different, you know, names for their business, but if you keep your branding for your social media and your website under your name, then it's a great way for people to remember who you are and to find you again. So, and the YouTube channel is also under Sandra Duran Wilson. So,
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sandra. It was an absolute joy to talk art
oh,
and
it was
inspiration.
wonderful.
Yes, yes, it was
I know
so
we
fun.
we kind of roamed around a few places, but that's how I like to create too.
Yes, it's just, going with the flow, intuition, just, yeah, it's following that voice almost of, huh, this reminds me of this. And then it's a really great dialogue. I really enjoyed it.
And I enjoyed it too, our conversation. Thank you for having me.
Of course, and thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Thank you to everyone out there for listening to the podcast. Your continued support means a lot to us. If you've enjoyed the episode, please leave a review for the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or leave us a comment on YouTube. This helps us reach others who might also benefit from the excellent advice that our guests provide. Thank you.